we are returning to our life, Baxter's DLC. How exciting! We're going for drinks with him in this episode. So, without further ado, let's get into it. It was late enough in the day that you were surprised to hear a knock on the door. Seeing who was waiting on the other side only doubled the surprise. Good evening, Callie. I returned home from my journey. Baxter's smile warmed like it was still the middle of the afternoon. Your confusion must have been written all across your face. He laughed as if he could read your thoughts. It was almost a week ago that you found Baxter in that exact same spot. He spun a tale about how he put in some plans to visit old acquaintances in North California after his parents had told him they were sending him to Sunset Bird. Baxter assumed that being in the same state meant that he was reasonably close for a visit, but he learned the hard way how daunting it would be to drive himself to the opposite end of California. Before he left, Baxter ended the conversation with a promise. On his return, he would tell you of the arrival in person. And there he was, true to his word.
Nice to see you.
It's lovely to see you again. I feel I've been away for an age. That arrangement had seemed like a stroke of brilliance, adding more adventure to my stay in the state, and assuring myself I would see friendly faces at least once in the season. Yet truthfully, I wouldn't have promised such a lengthy trip away from town if I had known who my neighbor was going to be. As pleasant as they were, it doesn't compare to what I have here. I missed you. Stunned, Baxter stopped talking. You'd be into the punch. But his surprise was quickly morphed into pure delight.
I missed you.
I missed you as well. Before anything else, you let Baxter actually come in. He cordially joined you in the family living room. With greetings and pleasantries all done, and an invitation to talk extended, he got right to the point, as you would have expected from him.
I hope I'm not being too forward.
Now, I hope I'm not being too forward, but I would like to spend more time with you. In fact, I was wondering if I might take you on a date. I spoke so boldly about that desire before, and it's long overdue. If that's what you want, of course. Yeah, I've been waiting for this. Crossing your arms, you made it obvious he hadn't even needed to ask. Any trace of caution in his expression vanished, and a wide, confident grin took its place. I was thrilled to hear that. And obviously, this tentative date would be based on your own schedule. It'd be ghastly if I expected you to drop everything simply because I've only made myself available. Whatever works best for you, I'll accommodate accordingly. It's late today, so I don't expect that, but I'm entirely free tomorrow. We must have angered the forces of fate, because our schedules keep clashing. You gave a deep huff of discontent. Baxter's smile faltered. Tomorrow I'm spending the afternoon visiting family. I don't think I'll be home until pretty late. But we could do something in the morning, as long as you don't mind it being kind of short. He likes the suggestion hopefully. It seemed like a good compromise, but it was hard to tell what Baxter thought. He stood there silently. The look on his face changed. It was strange. There was a problem, certainly, but he was free and so are you. What could seem much of a roadblock? We can hang out some other day, if that's not what you had in mind. His expression shifted, again, and not for the better. Whatever caught him off guard in the first place was nothing in comparison. Baxter was getting even more Pertubet? I don't know how to pronounce that word. I'm sorry. And just as quickly, Baxter snapped out of it. He released a steady breath and regained much of his usual relaxed composure. He released a steady breath and regained much of his usual relaxed composure with his next inhale.
I apologize.
Forgive me for being distracted. Your idea is perfectly manageable. More than, in fact. I'd prefer if we didn't put things off to another day. How about we go to a cafe and get coffee or tea, or whichever drink you prefer? I've seen some very nice ones when I've been out exploring the area, but I haven't patronized any of them yet. Deal! That'd be great. Excellent. Tomorrow morning it is, then. Oh. Hey. It was always going to be a busy day, but at least now tomorrow it had a dash of excitement. The anticipation was mutual, and Baxter's tone sweetened. You got all the details squared away. Baxter volunteered to play driver for the short trip, and you planned to drop by his house in the morning, once you had gotten ready. When that was settled, there was nothing left to do other than say your goodbyes for the night. Baxter politely dipped his head. Bye! Have a good night.
Goodbye for today.
You as well. I'll see you soon, Callie. I love the voice of Baxter. Whoever voiced him did a really good job. I love it. As he turned to go, you both found little ways to stretch the seconds, lingering for as long as you could. Then, he was gone. The rest of the night passed pleasantly. Your thoughts wandered along the fun path tomorrow could unfurl in. Your thoughts wandered along all the fun paths tomorrow could have unfold in. The next morning you were up and out the door like a whirlwind. Your eyes were set on your goals as you went up the hill and across the street to Baxter's condo. Knocking on the door, you tried to guess the cafe Baxter had in mind. He had mentioned before that there were a few that caught his eye, but you weren't sure what that meant exactly. Your growing curiosity wouldn't have to wait much longer. Or maybe it would. As you stood in front of Baxter's shut condo, you gradually realized it was taking quite a while for him to answer the door. Oh yeah, he's not a morning person. Blinking, your head swiveled as you double-checked for your insanity that you had the right house. You did. But Baxter was still nowhere to be seen. You rang the doorbell next. Another couple of minutes passed, and you finally began to hear a faint clattering inside his house. The door pulled open a crack. It was barely enough for Baxter to see that on the other side, wearing a half-witted daze, and not his usual outfit. That was for sure. Hey there, Baxter, you okay? He yawned loudly, then sluggishly followed your line of sight to look down at himself. He frowned for a second. It clicked. He wasn't dressed for the event. You could guess those were his pajamas.
Forgive me.
I deeply apologize, Callie. I will need an additional moment before we can leave. I'm running late, it seems. And he shut the door. You were left there on his doorstep. entirely at a loss. His bizarre behavior was unexplainable. At least for the second it took for your brain to completely process what had happened. It dawned on you that it was the first time you'd actually seen Baxter before noon, and how that might not be a random coincidence. He wasn't a morning person. Told you. Suddenly the door flung all the way open, nearly knocking you backwards. Baxter was back, and this time you got a full view. Oh, yep. That was OBS I clicked on. Whoopsies. Look at that boy Baxter. He looks so... He's smiling, but his eyes and eyebrows tell another story, that he feels so apologetic or something. But, I will say, I love pajamas that have fucking pockets. Especially pants pockets, or trouser pockets, whatever you want to call them. They are... Just guess. I love it. And I also love his current pajamas. They are adorable. Proud boy. Baxter was indeed wearing only his pajamas. Black and white PJs, of course. Excuse me, that was rather impolite. You couldn't tell by his tone of voice which incident he was referring to. Shutting the door in your face, or the way this situation was dragging on forever. It was hard to know. But Baxter moved aside enough that you could pass by. Why don't you come in? You went inside, past the entryway, and into the living room. At that point, you were more concerned about Baxter's safely navigating his own home than you were about making it to the cafe. Look at this house! It is amazing! I love the dolphin. Dolphins are cutely weird. And that's saying it the best way I can. Like, I wouldn't really go near a dolphin anymore. But, like, I honestly prefer penguins over dolphins. But this game doesn't have penguins, so I have to go with the next best thing in this case. I did have a point where I did like dolphins. But, yeah. Not my thing no more. You paused to take in the space, unable to help yourself. After all those years of trying to avoid this condo, you were actually inside. Honestly, you never thought that would happen. But as much as you wanted to explore, there were even more unexpected things taking precedence. Your attention returned to Baxter. He closed the door and followed behind. Baxter pinched the bridge of his nose between his thumb and forefinger as his feet dragged. Please, do take a seat. I am so sorry for not being prepared. I set an alarm an hour ago, and I know I had to go off. Somehow, in the matter of moments, that hour disappeared, and now you're here. And I have little doubt about your punctuality. He moved the hand to rub his forehead with his palm as if to catch the memories lost inside. You didn't rush him. Instead, settling yourself in a chair. I don't know how this could have happened, it's... Baxter's words became too mumbled and faint to hit. Baxter's words became too mumbled and faint to understand. That brought your gaze back to him directly. And you got an eyeful of his exposed stomach. Baxter was in the process of taking off his shirt over his head, but in his groggy state, the material had gone cold over his ears. He does not look like a happy bunny. Unbothered, you waited for him to finish. This was easily the last thing you could ever expect from someone normally so formal. But you can't be that surprised either. Baxter was moving on sleepy autopilot. A flawed one, too. He struggled to free his face from his shirt before you could ask him if you wanted any help. Baxter let the fabric go. He readjusted it comfortably back on his body, walking through the tiredness to conceptualize a plan B. Then, he squinted at you, confused. He followed your line of sight to his wrinkled clothes. Oh. No, that's not correct. I'm sorry. I'm used to living with doormates. They don't care about that sort of behavior. I've lost my manners. I'll go change properly in my room. There's no harm done. I really don't mind. No. He waved his hand, missing your notion completely. He sighed deeply, still seeming absent-minded. You're my guest, and I'm being terribly rude. We're also his partner. Please, stay here. I'll be back in 2 shakes. And with that, the situation was out of your hand. You watched him fumble his way through the room. Baxter made it upstairs, and the sound of the door sent the house rattling. The following dead silence only lasted a split second. Sorry! His voice rang out from what you assumed was his bedroom. His next words were even clearer. He must have opened the door again to speak. I didn't mean to do that at all. That's okay. I think I pulled the door too hard. No problem, that happens. I swear, the noise was completely unintentional. He didn't add anything else after that. He remained where he left you, in a rapidly growing state of disbelief. Put it nicely, Baxter was a total mess, and somehow the universe deemed you worthy enough to having a front row seat. That was extremely cute. Despite not being Baxter's ideal part of the day, he was still trying so hard to make it work. That consideration and intent meant a lot. And the bedhead and pajamas and grogginess silliness was an added bonus that you were going to treasure. After a few minutes, the clumsy bumping around upstairs faded. A part of you considered the chances of whether or not he'd fallen asleep somewhere, but the sound of careful footsteps soon banished that thought. Baxter returned downstairs and properly dressed as well. He drifted his fingers along the buttons of his shirt, double-checking that everything was in order.
Hello.
Here I am. Good morning. You were pleasantly surprised to see him already. Hopefully he was actually doing as well as he was trying to. Morning, sleepyhead. I can't emphasize this enough. Thank you so much for your patience. I apologize for that unnecessary bump in our plans. Baxter graciously moved beyond his earlier antics. If you hadn't witnessed it firsthand, you probably wouldn't have believed it even happened. Though, as you observed him more, you noticed the signs. He hadn't erased all evidence of a few minutes ago, if you knew to look for it. His usually pristine and deliberate put-together outfit was pulled and tucked in the wrong places. There were even wrinkles. Baxter turned his head in an attempt to suppress a yawn, and there was a dull edge to his entire demeanor. He hadn't quite reached his usual razor-sharp wit yet. It was alright. You still quite enjoyed this soft, easygoing state of Baxter. You don't have to do this. I know, Callie. The thing is that I want to do this. I wouldn't have attempted to face the morning to begin with if I didn't. But then his smile slipped, and you could see Baxter's guilt surfacing. I should admit directly that mornings, as you might have surmised, a challenge. It wasn't always this way. Dude, I can relate. I am an afternoon person as well, and even then I'm still fucking tired. I swear. The older I get, the more the early hours become a chore. I've got up at dawn for school years, but college allowed me to actively avoid morning classes altogether. Now I can't remember the last time I had an occasion to be out before 11 at the earliest. Oh, I used to be like, the period where I wasn't dog sitting, I was always up in the afternoon, but the sooner as I had 4 dogs to dog sit, I was up at like, some days it was like 7. One day it was 6, but I'd woken myself up and went back to sleep promptly. Then it's just like been around 9, 10-ish in the morning. Cause like the first couple of days I'm just like, dude, let me have a lie-in. I don't want to get up at the ass crack of dawn. You're used to being up, and they're just like, okay. You like sleep, we like sleep, nap time. and I ended up having a few dogs in my bed. And now my dogs are just napping. I kind of train my dogs to nap. I like sleep. And, well, I don't like going to sleep, that's the thing. I like going back to sleep when I woke up. I need to shake that nasty habit. I need to become adult. And because I need to get out of the house Sunday. But, it's currently Friday of recording. The 25th. Okay, I'm off track. Baxter rubbed the back of his neck. His frustration with himself was palpable. Seriously, you don't need to feel bad. Some people are built that way. Nevertheless, it's jarring to be entirely lost for a specific chunk of the day. I expected I would have a rough start, but I never thought I would handle the occasion this poorly. I certainly would have made bad choices if I knew I'd be shown. I certainly would have made bad choices if I knew this was the side I would be showing you. Yeah, he is angry, but with himself. Oh, poor Bean. The intensity in his voice gradually lessened until the final part was delivered quietly. He couldn't even look at you as he muttered. But if you're still interested, I would be thrilled to go on our charming cafe breakfast. It would be a shame to miss out on the chance. I'd like that, but if I'm driving. Baxter chuckled and scratched the side of his cheek bashfully. Out of everything that happened this morning, this was what visibly embarrassed him. Oh, he's blushing. I accept your courteous offer. Great. It was a relief that Baxter agreed so easily. Not much could ruin the event for real, but a car crash would manage that quite effectively. Baxter's feet scuffed over the ground as he followed you out of the condo. He simply shut the door before walking into the street. Hey, Baxter, you might want to lock that. You couldn't believe that he was about to leave the neighborhood like that. Wow, with normal Baxter, you couldn't believe it. It made perfect sense with morning Baxter. Baxter paused, and his face scrunched up in confusion. He pointed at the condo. He followed the motion, peering over his shoulder. Ah, good catch. Thank you. He waited by the car while he hurried back. From what you could observe, Baxter didn't need any more help locking the front door this time. Though he hesitantly glanced in your direction before he moved, and you gave him the thumbs up, Baxter rejoined you on the road. He might have been living in a daze, but when Baxter was standing at the driver's side of his car, you could see his focus sharpen. He unlocked the vehicle before offering you the keys. You gladly accepted them, and he held the door open while you climbed inside. Baxter closed it, and went to the opposite side. He sat into the passenger seat and positioned himself with his elbows leaning against the door. Baxter silently watched you get acquainted with the car. When you were both ready, Baxter promptly brought up the directions to the cafe. Here we are. Sighing contently, you leaned in your seat, soaking in the morning sun coming through the window. You're optimistic that the date was going to be great. The drive wasn't long at all, and no issues came along. It was smooth sailing. You hopped out, and the scents wafting from the cafe were enough to pull you towards the propped open front door. Before I forget, tucking the key ring around your finger, you dangled Baxter's keys in front of his face. He grinned at your playful teasing and snatched them. Thanks for driving. No problem. Once you were both inside, the intermingled smells became easier to decipher. Chocolate, cinnamon, bacon and eggs, and, most especially, coffee. There was something about that particular brew of coffee that immediately reminded you of your parents. The two of them loved to have long, easy mornings in the kitchen, with mugs of coffee between them on the counter. They might be doing that at home that very minute. But before you could tug on that thought any further, a waiter passed by, carrying a slice of Before you could tug on that thread of thought further, a waiter passed you by. Oh my god. A waiter passed by, carrying a sliced quiche. You breathed deeply, picking out the various ingredients before closing your eyes. You could confirm it. It looked impressively made. Baxter led you towards the showcases. There were even added baskets of bread and other treats there. Every inch of space was fully stocked with options. Clearly, coming early had its advantages, whether you ate anything or not. This side was delightful. There was a charm of how they presented the fresh pastries. That was the word he used when pitching the place. Charming. Baxter was right on the money there. It was a pleasant little cafe with a comfortably quiet atmosphere. Though, it was a bit more formal than a typical coffee joint. You couldn't sit anywhere or order at the front. A member of the waitstaff needed a seat and serve you. You found that detail to be a Baxter thing. It was absolutely him to choose a sit-down restaurant, even for a casual breakfast. A server came over and gestured you to follow her through the room. She brought you two shiny... A server came over and gestured you to follow her through the room. She brought you to a shiny two-seater table and passed out the menus. Welcome. I'll bring some order, but if there's anything you'd like to drink, I can put the order in now. Or you can take some time to think about it. You'd be a lifesaver if you brought me a black coffee, please. I'm like... a hot coffee. You take cream and sugar with that? No, neither. Thank you. Gotcha. I'll get that right out. Just relax and browse the menu. And you're welcome to take a peek at the front to see what baked goods we have prepared today. He clicked her pen close and left you two alone. Baxter sunk in his seat, slinging one arm over the back. His eyes were heavily closed, but his smile remained serenely in place.
Now.
Please order to your heart's content, whatever you fancy. But don't be alarmed that I don't have much of an appetite in comparison. Coffee is all I need this morning. I get that. It's still pretty early. It is. You weren't entirely sure if you were going to order anything yet. It was a deliberation you had with yourself while Baxter took a break. Luckily for you, the cafe's layout was open enough that you could observe the glass cases from the front, from your comfort of your seat. You passed the time comparing what was printed on the menu to the real-life displays. Soon enough, the waitress was on her way back to your table. You passed out the two orders, then placed a white cup filled with richly colored coffee in front of Baxter and a hot coffee by you.
Perfect.
Perfect. Are either of you ready to order? I'm taken care of. Thank you. I'd like a pastry. There was no way you could resist. The drinks by the front of the cafe looked too good to pass up. The waitress smiled attentively and ready to pan. I'm all ears. I'd like a piece of coffee cake. Great choice. That sounds really yummy. I'd like to hope it is. And that I'm not about to shovel poison in my mouth. I'll get these menus out of your way then, and I'll be back soon with your order. She skipped out the menus and walked away, dropping them off at the front stand before disappearing into the kitchen. Baxter shifted his attention to you.
Lovely.
I'm pleased you're getting something to enjoy. Another long-wide yawn forcefully derailed Baxter's train of thought. He politely tried to shield you from the image by covering his mouth. looks like he's so angry for some reason right now with those eyebrows. It's like the evil grin. But once he wrangled himself back into control, Baxter flashed you with a grin, though it was lost with playful umps as his eyes remained extra lidded. He had something in mind, but he also seemed fairly content to simply gaze at you, languidedly. Languidedly? I don't know. Never really heard that word before. Baxter lifted his coffee and pressed the edge of the cup to his lip. He took a slow sip before putting it down. Baxter propped an arm against the table so he could hold his chin up. Normally that would have been a casual gesture, but anyone watching could tell that he desperately needed help keeping his head upright.
Is that fine?
Before food arrives and steals all your attention away, would be fine to ask a question. Oh, sure. Ask away. What exactly is the event you have on the horizon? It's nothing crazy. I'm gonna see my aunt and uncle.
Certainly.
Oh, thanks. Actually, do you remember my cousin Lee? She invited us on the boat trip.
Certainly.
I certainly recall. She had a bright personality. Okay, this episode needs to go before the boat trip. Got it. Got it. Otherwise it won't make that much sense, I guess. Oh, my legs. I certainly recall. She had a bright personality. Yeah, it's our parents. Too bad Lee won't be there this time. She is busy. His response was cut off by another yawn, and one that morphed into a wince. Baxter tried to smooth things with a sweet smile.
I'm sorry.
I promise. That wasn't me being bored. He blinked. It was hilariously obvious that his eyelids didn't easily unstick. You bit down the inside of your cheek and tried not to laugh. It's alright. You're tired. Exactly. Please continue. Yeah. Out to my aunt and uncle. It's my uncle who I'm directly related to. He's my mom's younger brother. We all get along. That's the part of my extended family we're closest with. Wow, in terms of location. I wonder, is it like biologically related to our deceased mom? Or is it something different? Now that's what I don't understand. I mean, I would assume it is, right? Laughing, you scratched the back of your head while you explained, Baxter nodding along, focusing on the sound of your voice. His smile softened as you grew more animated speaking about your family. It's not that I don't have a good relationship with everyone on my Ma's side, but they mainly live in Hawaii, so it's a lot harder to see them in person. Yeah, it is. Our mothers, not our deceased mother. Okay. My grandparents used to live in California when me and Liz were little, so they could help out, but that was only temporarily. And yeah, it's nice having a family we can see more often. Your voice trailed off with the fond thoughts of your family, and then your eyes snapped wide open. All Baxter did was ask about your plans for the day, and somehow you ended up rambling about so much more. Sorry for getting off the topic. Nonsense. I enjoyed listening to everything you shared.
Thank you.
Thank you for telling me about your family. It was lovely to hear about them. That's a relief. Most people around already know about all that, so it's a while since I've gone to talk about it. I'm glad I could offer you that opportunity. The waitress returned with your order. She placed it carefully on the table. Enjoy! I weren't, so that tweet. Thank you. You didn't waste a single second and gave it a good taste. It was good. Since you had basically covered everything that you were doing later, you didn't need to juggle thinking, talking, and eating. Just as Baxter intended. It was nice to preoccupy yourself with this treat. Baxter, meanwhile, only had his coffee, and he was acutely aware of that difference. Baxter pinched the inside of his lip with his teeth, while he tried to search through his foggy thoughts for something to say. He wanted to be good company, but he wasn't sure how to accomplish that. Ah, I know. How about I tell you what happened while I was on my trip? What the hell are the details?
In that case,
then. Baxter sat up straighter in his chair and considered how he wanted to be in the story. His focused mindset momentarily overcame the tiredness that clung to him. As you know, I traveled to Northern California, and it was monumental. And it was a monumental drive. 0 hours of me, myself, and the road. Me, myself, and I. That car was wonderful. It got me there and here again without a single issue, and it had every reason to rebel against all the potholes I accidentally hit. Baxter paused on that note and took a drink of his coffee. He placed the cup down on the table and winced. That's somewhat silly now that I'm vocalizing it, but I feel a tinge of guilt for all the miles I managed to fill in that vehicle over the course of this vacation. Sighing deeply, Baxter wore a wistful look. He understood the magnitude of his trip. Hopefully his mysterious acquaintance was the laid-back type. On a brighter note, the drive was even more scenic than I had imagined. It's a shame I couldn't snap a single picture. Still, I am grateful that I was able to leisurely travel across the state while I was still here. Yeah, I bet. It must have been an incredible marathon of sights. And all that fuss to see some old family friends. Believe it or not, they're actually people my parents have known since well before I was alive. Wow. Wow, indeed. I can't imagine how... Wow, indeed. I can't even imagine knowing someone for that many years. Though, between you and I don't have much of a relationship with them myself. Really? But you went out of your way to see them. I know. They've always been fond of me, almost as if I was their own nephew. They're more than happy to open their door to give me the chance. This might surprise you, or perhaps not, but I managed to get along famously with an older set. So, it was only polite to make the social call while in the relative area. And there was plenty to catch up on and discuss while I was there. We even catch up on fantastic shows. It's nice that you enjoyed the trip within your trip. Baxter's nose scrunched as he chuckled. He took another quick sip of his drink. I can't agree more. The two of you continued to chat about upcoming plans while finishing your drinks. And also, in between several more, extended and defiant yawns from Baxter. Eventually he glanced towards the windows, his brow pinched. He didn't say anything on his own, so you asked. What's wrong?
Well...
I'm worried that I might be keeping you too long from your other plans. Not too late yet. I don't want that to be a yet. Your family's important. Do you want to get going then? Yes. That would be for the best. He tapped in his seat until he caught where the waitress had gone. Baxter waved, and she returned a minute later. Could we please have the check? He appreciated the gesture to cover it. There'll be one ticket. You've got it. I'll get that for you right away. As soon as the waitress was out of sight, Baxter let out another yawn, but it morphed into a frustrated groan. I'm getting fairly sick of that. His tone didn't sugarcoat a single feeling. Pouting, Baxter crossed his arms and tightly shut his eyes. Unfortunately, coffee can only do so much. Baxter murmured, and roughly rubbed the sides of his face. His frustration manifested visibly in a grimace. I can distinctly feel my own eyeballs in my skull due to the strain. His hand dropped on the table and the glasses rattled softly. That only made his mood worsen. I hate that. I shouldn't have to be so aware of my own presence in this body. Sorry, Baxter. Then you wondered if this morning was an ill-fated sign all along. It was horrible that he felt so uncomfortable, trying to force himself to win a losing battle. You have been more than gracious for staying through my complaints. I don't mind. It would be better if I could do more. No, you've done enough. I shall live through it. You smiled, and Baxter genuinely tried to match it, despite how he was feeling. The waitress approached once more with a small black folder and placed it on the center of the tabletop. Can I clear any of this away for you? No rush if you're not ready. Please, take it all. We're about to leave. The waitress got right to work, gathering the cups. Baxter, meanwhile, picked up the folder and opened it. A few moments, the server was off again, and Baxter peeked at you from over the top of the folder. Thank you, Callie. I appreciate you making time for me at the very last minute, especially on a day when you were already so busy. Nah, thank you for inviting me. Of course. It's always a treat to see you. Baxter's half-lidded gaze lingered contently while he reached in his pocket. Though his tired eyes snapped open, he reached the alertness he had been striving for in an instant. My wallet! He stared at you helplessly. Baxter was sober and extremely aware of the reality he found himself in. I didn't bring my wallet. When I got dressed, I did not recall taking my wallet off the nightstand. Haha, that means it'll be my treat. You grinned boldly, but your cheer fizzled out when Baxter didn't respond. He continued to stare at the check in horror. Understandably, Baxter was mortified. He threaded his fingers through his hair. I'll quickly run back and get it and return, but then I'd have to abandon you here, and that's not any better. Perhaps I take an electric payment. I could send through my phone. Take it easy. You got a black coffee, not a full-course meal. I can cover for you. The corner of his mouth twitched, and you could read that as a sign that he had at least heard you. Though, you suppose it was only because he had reached a dead end in his own abilities to solve this problem. Baxter pressed his palms against his eyes, and his fingers curled tightly. He released a slow, shaky breath. He reached out, only to freeze halfway across the table. From his tense body language, he was trying with great difficulty from trying to keep himself from getting truly upset. You shouldn't push him. You weren't sure how to help or what to do. You could only watch. He exhaled deeply once more, and this time he lowered his hands, folding them neatly on the table.
Yes.
I'd appreciate that greatly. He couldn't quite look at you while he spoke, though the forced politeness in his tone reached you completely. Good. That's nothing, I got you. You collected the check he dropped in his panic and slid your card into it. When the waitress swung by, you handed it over. There was no trouble to be found at this table. Thanks a bunch. Just 1 minute. You walked off and you shifted your attention to Baxter. In that brief period, his shoulders had lost their defeat slump, and he sat up stiffly upright instead. He stared at your reaction with a delicate smile. Please don't misunderstand. I'm entirely fine. The issue with my behavior towards you. You don't need to force yourself to make me feel better. This was all my mistake. His lips pressed into a fine line. It was crystal clear that he was preemptively stopping you from further okaying the situation. Your gaze dropped to the tabletop, and the awkwardness was stifling to do anything else. The way Baxter was beating himself up for perfectly normal missteps was horrible. You didn't like it at all. There was a reason why people called these kinds of situations accidents. Because there was no manipulative or malicious intent. His only crime today was being human and sleepy. It would have been great to remind him of all that, but Baxter was far too irked to hear any of it. He wanted to move on, so you bookmarked things there. The day wrapped up in a haze. The waitress returned your cards and wished you both on a wonderful day, then you left. Baxter managed to muster up a few things to discuss on the car ride home, but the conversation was distant and disjointed from how you both normally clicked. You made it home safely, though not before silence had time to form. The slamming of his door to exit the vehicle was the first you'd heard from Baxter in a while. The two of you stood on the street, face to face, but the awkwardness from the cafe had also come along for the ride, and it lingered forebodingly. This wasn't something you wanted to continue between you and him. Neither of you made a move to leave, a promising sign that he was struggling with the same thought. Baxter began sliding his fingers through his hair, but he paused mid-motion and dug his nails into his scalp. His controlled expression strained.
I'm sorry.
Callie, this is my fault. I not only forgot my wallet, but I made things increasingly worse by acting immature about it, undoubtedly making you uncomfortable. It may be hard to believe at this point, but often I can deal with unexpected issues as a responsible adult. Today's done a little more than usual. I'm big enough to admit that. It sadly did not help that all of this was coming on the heels of the already disastrous first impression. I had been hopeful that I could still fix the overall impression by the end. Needless to say, I didn't succeed, and I completely understand if you were doubting the merit of the relationship with me at this point. I presented myself terribly to you. What a mortifying first date to go on.
But...
However, if you're willing to, I would like to ask for a second date. I can take you out again for drinks tomorrow night, or rather any night you have free. I promise, the next one will be better. A dusting of rose blush in his cheeks while he barreled through everything he needed to say before he could get a single word in. Finally, Baxter paused to breathe. He blinked, trying to absorb the magnitude of everything he said. Now that he laid all his cards on the table, there was nothing left to do but anxiously wait. Above all else, he wedged in a space for you two to talk. That was a relief. You don't have to try so hard to impress me. Believe it or not, but I actually enjoy hanging out with you, even if you're not ideally graceful at every step. I know it wasn't your plan for anything bad or embarrassing to happen, but that's why they're accidents. That wouldn't make me want to stop talking to you. You're far too kind, but I will need some clarification if that's a yes or no for the second round. I think I can pencil you in. How does tomorrow night sound? His gaze was gentle, if only for a second look. Baxter swiftly resumed his usual grin and confidence.
Very well.
I'll be in touch later with a specific time, and potentially a suggestion for what you might want to wear. Have a lovely rest of your day with your family. Tell your mothers and sisters I said hello. I will. Excellent. See you again soon. He waved goodbye, and honestly, it seemed to be in a much better mood than only a few minutes ago. He waved too, even though his turned back couldn't see. Bye. He steadily walked home, and once he was safely inside, you couldn't hold your frown in any longer. All morning Baxter acted as if he had been the one who needed that approval. To him, you weren't individuals getting to know each other. He was an outsider who had jumped through hoops or to be excluded. That was the impression you'd gotten. It was more than upsetting. Maybe he took it that hard because he was so tired. That felt like wishful thinking, but you thought so anyway. It was possible that Baxter would feel more comfortable after he rested. But even if he wasn't, then you would hope that he would be allowed to... And if he wasn't, then you hope that you... Oh my god, what is wrong with me? And if he wasn't, then you would hope that he would allow you to show him that your company didn't have to be like that. The rest of the day was focused on your family, and it was overall a great one. It was nice spending the afternoon with your aunt and uncles, Mons and Liz. And you remembered to tell them Baxter said hi. You were half asleep when you made it home, and collapsed onto your bed. Soon, morning had come again. The afternoon that followed moved strangely fast and slow, because you knew there was another date at the end of it. Exactly as promised, you received a text with the set hour to meet him at his condo. Baxter informed you that it was going to be late, when you'd be leaving, so he recommended that you had dinner as usual. Apparently this place did not serve meals, only drinks and appetizers. Interesting. Along with that, Baxter made the eyebrow-raising suggestion that you should wear formal attire. Even more interesting. He included an assurance that he'd be prepared when you were ready to leave. During dinner, you mentioned that you were going out with drinks with Baxter later. Your mom was still commenting on your plans when you left to get ready. Even with a few teasing remarks over the dress code floated upstairs with you. When you opened your drawer, your mind was made up. You'd wear something grandly formal. You closed the drawer and instead dug into the very back of your closet. You plucked the pieces that you almost never wore. Baxter suggested formal, but that was Baxter speaking. Formal to him had to mean something entirely more on the grand scale of fancy. Wherever he was taking you, you doubted it would be possible to overdress, even in your nicest things. There were a few minutes before you had to leave, so you made sure that you had everything you might need while you were out. You ran through the essentials: phone, house keys, money, ID. As you felt bad for Baxter, you didn't want to run into a similar problem of forgetting something important. It was a good reminder for both of you to be careful. Once you knew it was all there, you went downstairs and waved to your moms on the way out of the house. Their goodbyes and well wishes reached you as you locked up. You walked down the street and arrived at Baxter's house. Quite literally seconds after ringing the doorbell, you heard the rattle of a doorknob turning. Was he just standing at the door waiting? The door casually opened, not too fast, not too slow, and there on the threshold was Baxter. This time, he wasn't in his pajamas, but instead a full suit that was naturally also black and white. Hello, and thank you for coming. Together, your elegant attire made a perfect match. That meant your remaining concern now was whether or not the location he had in mind would actually make sense for how dolled up you both were. Knowing Baxter, there was at least a 50-50 shot. You look incredible, Callie.
I love it.
I believe the both of us will be the ideal guests for this occasion. I can't tell you enough how delighted I am that you're accompanying me tonight. Thanks. I was hoping I wouldn't disappoint.
Never.
You disappoint me? I don't imagine that's possible. And this suits you. Channeling every bit of your mom's pun power, you easily finished your joke by waving your hands in front of him. Baxter snorted and instantly tried hiding his face by turning away from you. Thank you very much. I had a feeling I might need this while I was vacationing here. Now that you're gone a good eyeful, you could disconcern that Baxter was truly himself. The exhaustion and embarrassment from yesterday's morning adventure were entirely removed from his features. You're definitely a night owl. That wise presumption. Whatever thought passed through his mind next, Baxter smiled mischievously. He flicked his wrist. To be truthful, I feel most alive during the late hours.
Now.
Shall we go? This isn't something we want to be late for. Lead the way. And so you both climbed into his car, and were off. Baxter drove you out of the neighborhood. Your attention lingered on the starry sky for a moment, able to see a good view of the moon until he took a lazy turn. When you turned back to Baxter, his expression said little. He still offered no obvious hints about your destination. The only thing you could count on was the place would serve some form of liquid, probably. So, why recommend formal wear? Well... He diligently stared at the road, not yet out of the residential streets of Sunset Bird. You caught a glimpse of his excitement as he continued talking. If you recall, I mentioned how we saw some shows while on my trip within a trip. You could call that my inspiration. Once you graciously accepted my invitation, I began the endeavor to search for a particular performance we could see together.
To be honest,
I had high hopes for what I could manage, even with such a short notice. And I happily doubt I shall... and I happily doubt you shall be disappointed. His words... He let his words settle, drumming up the anticipation. Coincidentally, the car rolled to a stop at a light. He turned to you with a proud grin. Tonight we'll be seeing a live show featuring a comedy of errors-style romance. His foot pressed on the gas as he turned on the main road. A show? That wasn't anything you were expecting, but then again, it was Baxter. You were getting the impression he liked to surprise you. Oh, wait. What drinks? Well, this is a cafe in the middle of the theater. That was very misleading information. That was a very misleading invitation. Not a cafe, but... Baxter's smile grew. He had expected your reaction. They do serve drinks. There's an excellent selection from what I found, and it will only be drinks. There's no food on the menu. He shrugged his shoulders, not particularly finding that to be a loss. You're glad you weren't hungry. However, as promised, the drinks are crucial to the experience. You'll see, this isn't some grand arena. You'll find tonight's entertainment is particularly immense. Setting of a jazz bar, all patrons will witness the story unfold in that very room. His voice lowered, theatrically so, fitting for the topic of the conversation.
Does that sound alright?
Also, if you'd like, it's possible for the actors to interact with you directly. That's amazing! You never heard of anything like that in the area. You wondered how Baxter had found it. It sounded like so much fun. He let out a single gleeful chuckle, and brightened considerably.
Excellent.
I thought you would appreciate it. It was so fortunate they were having a performance tonight. No kidding. It was perfect. You couldn't wait to get there. You pictured the place, figuring it looked classy. Maybe there'd be a band in the corner, and elaborately dressed actors right out of an old noir movie. How exciting! You get to see the show up close. Baxter drove into the heart of the city, passing by the twinkling lights of the urban night, until he pulled into a public parking lot. He switched off his map. He switched his phone's map app to walking mode. It's an 8-minute stroll from here. You shrugged, not needing to point out that walking tends to be your main form of transportation anyway. Another reason why I do monotone voice for this is so I might not spontaneously start laughing in the middle of speaking again, considering that it's happened in the past. So we'll see if that actually works in my favor, though I've been close to almost laughing. Both of you exited the car, and Baxter made a note where he was leaving it. Luckily, the lot was well lit, and located in a busy area. It'd be hard to miss. He led you across the road, then followed the sidewalk until his phone proclaimed that you had reached the correct building. Baxter got the door for you. Thanks. Of course. Inside, he switched his phone off of the map, but continued tapping away at it. Now, where is it? He huffed as he scrolled at the screen. You could immediately tell when he found what he was looking for from his reaction. He finally relaxed into his normal state of friendly nonchalance. Curious, you hoped you had closer to read what it was. It made sense when you saw it was the digital confirmation of his purchased tickets. In front of you was a small line where a man would check tickets before waving people onward. Baxter slipped into the back, and you waited until it needed. I'm glad we arrived on time. Missing the show was the only chance of the event going awry. I'll make it work even if we were late. The other guests in line were dressed to the nines. Some were even in vintage clothes. Baxter's previous advice was correct. The wait wasn't too long. After chatting with Baxter for a moment, it was his turn to show his digital tickets. The usher was young, probably only a few years older than you. The bags around his eyes spoke to the fact that this was nowhere near the start of his day. These are for you and your friend, right? He nodded, and took a step next to Baxter, making it clearer that you were here together. Cool. Thanks for coming in. We're thankful for you having us. Baxter shoved his phone into his pocket for good once he got his approval. He inspected the two of you and tilted his head to the side. Here are some ground rules before you enter the show. Everyone gets them. They explain the guidelines, the assumptions list? I don't know that word. That he'd obviously said 100 times before. For the most part, the rules you wanted to act as polite human being, you could do that. Last, if you want to actually participate in the show, you can take one of these necklaces. He pointed out a box of glowing jewel necklaces. Each was a gaudy enough that anyone wearing those would be noticeable in a crowd. Wearing one of these beauties means that you're a part of the same world as the actors are. No necklace, no participation. The actors will treat you like an invisible audience member. You can still speak out if you're suddenly inspired, but no one's gonna put focus directly on you. So, any takers?
My pleasure.
It would be my pleasure. Baxter volunteered immediately, and the usher fished a necklace from the box. I'll make one too. I wish I actually knew how to do like more of a formal kind of voice, so I would be able to do a Baxter impression much better than what I'm currently doing, which is kind of going from monologue to just not monologue, and then back into monologue whenever I'm talking with Baxter. It's getting a little confusing for me. I might have to work on my Baxter formality thing before my next recording. Who knows? I should probably work on that. Or the usher pulled out a second necklace and handed them out with an encouraging expression. Enjoy the show. You were waved off and allowed to enter the showroom, past the heavy double doors. The showroom was a sight to behold. From floor to ceiling, it was lit up. Yet none of that was bright enough to be blinding. The bar was full of expensive bottles, guiding engravings. The back had a pit for musicians, large enough for a full band to play. The instruments were already set up. You were taken to the bar and seated at the two empty stools at the end. The booths along the walls were already filled with groups of other guests, laughing and clinking glasses. They had a full house. This was a popular event, maybe even a bigger deal than what Baxter presented it as. The ages varied. Some of the crowd was made up of fresh-faced 20-somethings, while the others were silver-haired elders. You might have been the youngest in the room. Almost everyone was dressed up. Sequins dresses, fit suits, expensive jewelry as far as the eye could see. No broad generalization to be made about the kind of people who would watch a show at a jazz club, other than most of them knew how to dress. The few exceptions in casual clothes stuck out between all the elaborate, well-coiffed looks. The second usher bowed and left you alone, just for a bartender to appear out of nowhere and pick it up right where they left off. They passed each of you a drink menu, smooth and practiced. Nice to see you tonight. Just let me know when you're ready to order. Of course. The bartender inclined his head accordingly, then busied himself with polishing a glass with a white cloth. The jazz bar took the immersion seriously. Even the guy serving drinks had a proper aesthetic for a world the show took place in. He wore subtle eyeliner, and there was something about how he carried himself that made him look like he was wandering off a movie set, especially with How, especially with highly coordinated shabby clothes for a uniform. He shared a look with Baxter before examining the menu. From first glance, it was impressive. In total, it held 5 pages of drinks, each one with detailed descriptions and some photos. He turned to the last section entirely for non-alcoholic drinks. Read the blurbs, enjoying both the descriptiveness and the sense of humor. A few minutes later, the waiter in a full suit turned up. His tie was muted maroon, and the only thing separating him from his clients was his pad for taking orders. You wondered why he approached you rather than leaving you to the bartender. Maybe because it was so busy? Welcome to our show! Can I get you something, or do you need some more time? Baxter leaned forward in his chair, no hesitation. I would like a baby Bellini, please. Baxter passed the menu back. The waiter took it with a polite nod, then turned to you. You glanced over your options with one final read-through, and then said you would like, let's just do a citrus shine mocktail. You handed your menu over, and the waiter put it with Baxter's. He inclined his head politely one more time. Thank you, esteemed guests. I'll return shortly. The waiter sauntered off and vanished through a side door, away from the bar. Baxter's fingertips tapped the counters rhythmically. The soft sounds faded into a din around you. He met your inquisitive glance with confidence.
Not bad.
I knew what I wanted as soon as I saw that name. I finally appreciated the sparkling drinks as well as speeches. With a wicked smirk, he lowered his voice to a husky rumble. I would prefer it without the baby, however. Same here. Always nice to meet someone with a good taste. In the distance, musicians floated on to the stage from the backstage. The sounds of tuning strings took over the soundscape as they prepared for the big event.
Exciting.
The action approaches. There was still a few minutes before he thought the production was scheduled to start. The air was full of anticipation, but still relaxed. The two of you chatted over your respective jazz music experience until the waiter arrived with your drinks. The waiter carried a silver platter with stiff formality. He passed out the glasses, not even leaving fingerprints due to his white gloves. Curiously, neither drink had been filled at the bar you're sitting at. He placed your citrus sunshine mocktail on the counter in front of you, before settling down Baxter's baby Bellini, BBB, for short. Thanks. Thank you so much. Gently, Baxter lifted his drinks to his lips and sipped at the fruity beverage. He appeared as the very picture of sophistication, with a stemmed glass in hand and a distant, unreachable gaze. Sitting there with him, everything suddenly hit you. Formal clothes, his fancy drink, the glamorous setting, and his dazzling smile all came together. He had pulled out all the stops for this adventure. It felt like whiplash compared to what happened with the far simpler, much more normal cafe date. It had been intentional. It had to have been intentional. You were certain that this sparkling glitz was his goal. He practically said it out loud with his original invitation. You were never going to underestimate him whenever he got the opportunity to prepare. You picked up your own drink and sampled the refreshment. It was delicious and had a pleasant consistency. After a flicker of the lights, an electric moment of silence, you heard the sounds of a keyboard. The crowd hushed, waiting on bated breath, and the rest of the band kicked in. The saxophone cut into song before being backed by a chorus of trumpets. The bass player strummed along while the drummer kept the time. Everyone around you straightened, on the lookout for something, nobody sure what, but they knew it when they saw it. The double doors at the front opened, and all eyes were on the pair as they entered. The leader strolled in with her heels clicking at the glowing walkway. Her form-fitting evening gown sparkled in the dazzling lights. She started to the center of the room, a grimace on her red-painted lips. Behind her, another actor casually followed. They could have easily been passed over, especially with many guests around them, dressed far more formally. This character was plain in appearance, especially compared to the glitter of the other. They took quicker steps and reached out. Both of the characters came to an abrupt stop in the center of the room. The glamorous one spoke loudly, letting her words carry over the band. My darling friend, you know I don't have time for this. I have to prepare for the show and must rest my voice. How else will I manage to sing? The singer sidestepped away from her friend, threatening the space between them. I do not want to discuss this. The friend shrank away but refused to back down. There was a fight in the way they stood. The singer sighed. She crossed her arms, her frustration towards the topic making her next words bitter. It's more than enough that my parents and his parents keep bothering me. You do not need to add to that number, my dear. I can't leave it alone, not when you're making such a mistake. The singer put up her hand, dismissing her friend. Her movement was as still as her stilettos. I repeat, I do not have time for this. I'm going to my dressing room. She swept across the room, and then glanced in your direction before quickly looking away. She exited through a door near the band. You were struck by her last expression. Was that sorrow? Longing? Either way, you had gathered the situation. The two were acquainted, and the diva was a performer at the venue. Her friend wasn't. They had come to offer unwanted, but likely needed assistance. The music slowed down, but suddenly sombered after the frantic energy of the singer's outburst. Her friend hadn't moved. They hugged their arms around themselves and slumped in defeat. You were so focused on them that when a voice came from right behind you, you almost fell your stool. It's like talking to a brick wall, isn't it? You craned your head over to the bartender, who was the same man who had passed you the drink menu, who was still at work polishing a glass. He was a bit part of the bit all along. It probably wasn't even a real bar. Yet again, their commitment to the realism surprised you. The friend took a deep breath before rushing over to the counter. Now that they were closer, you could tell their clenched hands were shaking. They directed a scowl at the bartender in full force. You need to talk to her. Unlike when they had spoken to the singer, these words were bitten out. They went as close to the bartender and not willing to allow him the same niceties afforded to their friend. The bartender scoffed in their face. He wasn't any fonder of them, but he was trying to retain an ounce of professionalism, decorum. Why would I? I've got no attachment to that lady. None of the crowd was buying it. You heard unconvinced snorts throughout the room. But she acted like I wasn't even here. Besides, she wants the stage, and that's it. All I'm good is for watching her. The same for everyone else in the world. He gripped the glass tightly. You could faintly hear the polishing cloth squeak against it. She's not interested in my words as she told you. There is no time for that. The friend objected harshly, pointing a finger to the bartender's face. They weren't letting him get away with such falsehood. She can't admit it because you won't admit it. You're making me laugh, kid. The only folks who want us together are you and our parents. He shooed the friend away by flinging his hand through the air. He had the audience captivated, half of them flinching from the gesture. I'm working. Don't block the bar. The friend tossed his hair at him before sulking away. They waved at the booths of necklace-wearing guests, then slid onto the edge of the cushion. They rolled their eyes, their entire head along with it, intentionally exaggerating. Their new table mates snickered. I don't know how I put up with either of them. You were starting to get a feel for the show, or the actors' behaviors were turned up to 11 for the sake of comedy. And the heart of the story was clear. The venue's singer and its bartender were in love but weren't admitted due to the outside pressure, and feared the other didn't feel the same. A clattering sound brought your attention back to the bartender. He put the glass he had been polishing away. With his hands free, he idly glanced around for his next task. He settled on you and Baxter. His gaze dropped to your necklaces, and he gave a professional smile. You're both in the story world. Can I get either of you a Can I get either of you anything? Refills, a new drink, on the house. Consider it an apology for all the ruckus. He leaned over the counter and nodded pointedly at the friend. They blocked their face with their hand and sunk into the booth, trying to escape the stare. One of the guests at their table happened to have a paper fan and held it out to them. They gratefully took it and hid behind it instead. The bartender shook his head, fed up. Baxter, meanwhile, grinned.
Gladly.
That would be delightful. I could use another baby Bellini. Of course, sir. Even while the picture of poison polite manners, Baxter gave the air of being quite smug over the formal address. The bartender shifted closer to you. You could smell the spiced cologne. And you? I could get around with this, or maybe not. You picked up your glass and swirled the drink around. Not wanting to hold up the show longer, you asked the bartender for a baby Bellini too. Got it. The bartender looked around the shelves of the fake bar, but scratched his head. Oh darn, I'm missing something. I always tell the owner that he needs to keep this place stocked better. He grumbled, a little more earnest complaint. Not wanting to give up, he thought about his options. The crowd tittered with amusement as the friend peeked out with a flush on their cheeks from the other side of the room. If I'm right, there's so in the back. We're done with your drinks soon. Of course. There's no need to hurry. I appreciate it. Baxter lifted his existing baby Bellini with the drama of a supervillain. He wondered if he was being unaware or trying to put on a good show. The bartender threw his cleaning cloth over his shoulder and briskly abandoned his station. He disappeared behind the curtained door beside the bar. You guess that's where the real drink station was, through there. You noticed the actual waiter bounced from table to table fulfilling orders, even during the performance. It made sense to keep the supplies somewhere off stage so that the bar could keep putting out drinks no matter what was happening with the story. Without the bartender, you and Baxter had to reorient yourselves as where the action went. Most of the crowd's eyes went away from the tables. The friend's character had scrambled out of the booth and paced along the length of the room. They were still troubled, and stopped just short of biting their nails. Just as they clasped their hands together, the singer made her reappearance. Music swelled as she sashayed out of her dressing room, once more taking the center of attention. Her presence spellbound the crowd, instantly taking focus. Ah! The friend cautiously crept over to her, stepping around tables between them. Feeling refreshed? Of course, darling, I'm a professional. Speaking of professionalism, why didn't you say hi to the bartender earlier? He's here, you know. The singer scoffed, echoing the same cadence the bartender had before. They were a perfect match of stubbornness. He doesn't like me, he made that very clear. He told his parents as much. He told my parents. She struck a defiant pose, sounding utterly disgusted. Who does that? What a cat! Her friend scratched the back of their head. Their face twisted comedically as they chose their words with care. Oh, her nails look so cute! I love them. Can you tell his parents that you did not like him when they suggested it? I also recall when your parents accused you of being attached to him. You denied it vehemently with him in the room. The singer huffed, but didn't deny the events. She and the bartender's relationship was messy. And isn't it true that you do like our illustrious bartender? If your foolish parents hadn't meddled, you would be all over each other by now. The singer let out a deliberate, prideful laugh. It was dark and barely concealing very hurt. Do not even pretend. He doesn't care for me, and I don't care for him. She cast her gaze over the pockets of attendees, gathered around her, and spread her arms wide. I bet everyone in this room heard him bad-mouthing me as soon as I left. Didn't you? He said you were like a brick wall. A brick wall? She placed her hand on her chest and leaned back. Around her, people nodded and confirmed her words. Of course, you'd sink so low. When the room finally settled, the singer had passed along a few more barbs about the bartender. The friend slung an arm around her. Can't you please hear me out? The singer groaned and shrugged out of her friend's embrace. She backed up with a frown. I need a drink. She spun to face the bar before thinking better of it. Apparently she didn't need a drink that badly. Not here, of course. I have standards. The sole of her shoe tapped on the floor. She needed action to deal with it all. That restless energy. I can't believe this counts as an emergency. Please hold. I need to fetch my crisis ball from my purse. She stuck her nose high in the air and swarmed off to her dressing room once more. Her friend stood alone in the center of the room. The desperado of the music made the room feel quiet. In the distance, a door slammed. The diva reached her room. Her abandoned friend visibly winced at the anger of the noise. They closed their eyes and mentally counted to 10. Slowly, their stance unwound as they forced themselves to relax. They glanced furtively to the left, then to the right. Okay! The last actor to the left spoke to the entire room, projecting their voice loudly. While they're gone, does anyone have any ideas to get those two to admit their actual feelings? It has been weeks of me putting up with their arguments. I'm sorry to say this, but I'm plumb out of ideas. People began shouting out or whispering amongst groups. The friend listened attentively as if one suggestion might hold the key to their very survival. Not all of the ideas were positive, or even workable plans. Just give up! I'm too stubborn for that. They aren't getting out that easily. Lock them in the back room together until they confess. I tried that last week. My friend knows how to pick the lock. Try making the bartender jealous. Set her up with someone else. I'll do it. Wait, The friend spied a vase full of flowers on a table near the back. They scrambled to collect them in a bouquet. These should work. The flowers can be given to our singer in celebration to her performance. If she thinks they're from the bartender. Maybe. This new electric smile on their face contrasted with the previous expression. For a moment, they faltered. But I can't give these to her. She'll know immediately they weren't from the bartender. Would anyone else be willing to help out? I know these two aren't given the best impression when they're trying to prove each other wrong. They are very cute together. They searched around the crowd, but brow furrowed. Please! He glanced around to see who would volunteer. After no one else stepped forward, Baxter lifted his hand politely.
I can do that.
I would not mind assisting. Thank you! The friend bounced over to Baxter and passed him the bouquet. He took it confidently and nodded. You are saving my sanity. They keep getting worse. Anyways, here's the plan. Although their tone was hushed when you'd been sharing a secret, that page carried out through the space. They're a talented actor, especially without a microphone to aid them. I'll go to her. You need to call her over and pretend the bartender got those flowers for her. Bud was too shy to hand them over directly. Agreed. I shall endeavor to make her believe me. The friend gave a thumbs up and scampered off to where the singer had left. Baxter inspected the flowers he held. The colors were vibrant. The bouquet would fit the style singer well, circumstances aside. A familiar smirk appeared on his lips. Delicately stroked a pedal with the back of a knuckle. His voice was low and in your ear. It's unlikely to work, but I do admire the friend's efforts. You whispered your agreement. Yeah. It admittedly was a silly plan, and there was no way that the singer would abandon her convictions for a few flowers. Maybe she'd surprise you, but even then, there was no contingency for the bartender. However, I do look forward to the results. I'm expecting a great deal of entertainment. The door to the singer's dressing room swung open, and the friend pulled the singer back into the main room. Their arms were locked together, but the singer was dragging her very tall high heels all the way. In one manicured hand was a tiny bottle, no doubt the aforementioned emergency alcohol. It was already half gone. It's not good to stay holed up by yourself all the time. You don't need to hide from everyone. I am not hiding, I'm simply very busy. Since they weren't fooled like the parents, the friend didn't buy that at all. Once the friend reached the center of the room, they released the singer. He rolled her shoulders back, still affronted by the rough treatment. Showtime.
Hello.
Excuse me. Baxter leaned back on his bar stool almost lazily and waved at the singer. I hate to bother you while you're so busy, but I have a gift for you. The singer dramatically faced him, her hair swishing with the movement. He sized him up, the flowers catching her attention. His smile was calm as he held the bouquet out to her. It's from an admirer. Boldly, the singer walked up to him. He was clanking all the way. She was interested, but suspicious. What admirer? Why, it was the bartender. How unexpected. Miss Starlet gasped and pressed both hands to her chest. She squinted hard at the flowers, as if it was a nest of snakes. She unscrewed the cap of her small bottle, tipped it between her pursed lips. She chugged the remaining liquid down. That got a huge laugh from the audience. She slammed her empty bowl down on the bar's counter and gasped for air, with a frightening glare. But, gently and slowly, ever so slowly, she reached out. Her fingertip touched a single flower stem. He paused. Then finished the movement, and wrapped her digits around it. Baxter patiently remained still for as long as she needed to process the present. Without warning, there came a shout from the far end of the bar. Got your drinks right here! Every head turned to see the bartender making his reappearance. Of a tray of drinks balanced on his right arm. Sorry for the wait, just had to... He froze mid-sentence, staring at the scene he had returned to witness. The singer standing next to Baxter, being offered a bouquet, a single flower crushed in her hand. It was deathly quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the band stopped playing until... Suddenly, the singer let out a mortified shriek. She flung the pro-offered flower and bolted, beating a frantic, desperate escape. She caneened around the corner and then... Slam! The deafening sound of the door being rammed shut. Another awful silence formed, having remained frozen where the singer fled. The bartender's attention returned to where you and Baxter were at the bar. His eyes were drilling holes into Baxter, his glare darting between his face and the remains of the bouquet, which he was still holding. He had been caught red-handed, literally, on the account of the roses. Unspeakably awkward, even your brain was screaming, "It's not real!" You can't help but be swept up in the overwhelming sense of the unease filling the room. Slowly the bartender marched over to the counter, his footsteps weighty and full of intent. He firmly set down the tray of drinks. The glasses rattled angrily, but not a drop was spilled. Then he cocked his hip, folded his muscular arm, striking a pose, which almost felt threatening, bristled with suspicion. "Wow, now I see how it is." He flicked a finger up and down, seizing Baxter up with it. "So, this piano-headed chump is who I'm losing to? Really?" The rather silly epithet got a fair number of titters from the audience, but the bartender wasn't laughing. He made a sound of the back of his throat and shook his head. He muttered angrily under his breath, "I should have known." "Wait!" A cry came from the other side of the room, the mutual friend. Silence distraught was bustling over their way, limbs frantically flapping with panic. "I can explain. It's all a misunderstanding. What I'm trying to say is stumbling over their own words." The friend attempted to lay out the situation. The flowers were all part of a plan to get the singer to admit her own feelings. As the friend nervously rambled, Baxter placed the bouquet on the counter, cautiously but firmly. Then he threaded his fingers together in silence, promised to swear off the florals. At first you weren't convinced that would work. The bartender's expression was thunderous as a summer rain cloud. His brows were set at a 90-degree angle, stern as steel. But some other patrons began to chime in with words of confirmation. His dark countenance began to clear. A number of emotions melted into each other on his face. Anger became confusion, confusion became understanding, and understanding became acceptance. Oh, the reverse of the 5 stages of guilt. He let out a long, tired sigh, and then folded his arms. "Oh, welcome back, Rhea." Okay, I hear ya. You were only trying to help. I'm sorry." He directed this apology to Baxter. "I shouldn't have gone angry. There's nothing wrong with your hair. Don't worry, I saw you holding those flowers and lost my cool." He chuckled bleakly. "That's on me, I'm the problem here." At this he hung his head and slouched where he stood. "I can't believe she'd run away like that, screaming as if she saw a ghost, like I'm the worst thing in the world. Is it really that awful being around me? Am I really that bad?" His voice was thick with emotion, pain behind every word. There was barely a dry eye in the whole building. A chorus of sympathy rose from the people around you. Sounds of comfort and encouragement in equal measure. A tender walked behind his bar and came to rest the palms flat on the counter, his thick arms spread wide. "I wish I knew what to do, you know. If only there was something, anything!" It was a frank admission, laden heavily with resignation. He bowed his head again, and was silent. There was a pointed pause. Into it, you heard Baxter gently clear his throat.
Honestly.
"If you will permit me to say, it can be hard to know what to do in these kinds of situations. But the important thing is that it makes you unhappy. Once you realize that, it should be less obvious. It should at least be obvious what not to continue doing. Dancing around your feelings like this will only lead further and further from what you want. So why stick to the same old tune?" The bartender gradually lifted his face to Baxter with inscrutable expression. If you like the charming singer, what would you ever have to gain by insisting otherwise? You don't need to propose or anything equally drastic, but why push her away when all you want to do is get closer? His voice gained a faint, glittering cadence, like he was a singer too, before it tapered away to nothing. On the countertop, you saw the bartender clench her fist. Heh, you got me pegged, you and everyone else in this joint. So I like her already. What good is that? She thinks I'm a joke. She wouldn't be seen dead with someone like me. We all know it. We all saw it. She wouldn't be seen dead with someone like me. We all know that too. You saw what just happened. Am I supposed to make myself look like an idiot? Waltz on over and tell her we should be pals? I'd start to be begging to be laughed at. No. I couldn't take it. Not from her. My friend is right, Tino. You're only making it worse. One hand came up to scratch the nape of his neck, a universal gesture of awkwardness. I guess you've got a point there.
I get it.
My understanding is I understand the concern. You needn't go any further than you're able to. The key is that you step forward in the right place first, or at least resist the urge to continue moving backwards. When the time comes, don't pull away. You'll only regret it later. The bartender rested one arm across the counter, easing into a stance that was more casual. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. His body language was loosening up. You gathered that he was mulling over what had been said, taking it all in. After a while, he cracked a cautious grin. You know, it's usually other people who want me to listen to their problems. And by listening, I mean, I just help them pick a poison, you know? The blunt edges when nothing else can do. Never thought I'd be on the receiving end, though. He rubbed a knuckle on the countertop and straightened up sternly. Ah, shoot, I forgot the ice with your drinks. I mean, real sloppy tonight, letting personal stuff get in the way of business. Sorry about that. He began to walk towards the heavy curtain, his black shoes echoing loudly on the floor. Let me go take care of that, and maybe cool myself off for a sec while I'm at it. With a click of his heels, and a swish of the curtain, he was gone. Now what? Became the unspoken consensus of the audience. An answer came shortly. Psst. It was in the form of a loud hiss at the other side of the room, from behind the corner where the singer had vanished. Your focus swung back to see the lady in question, poking her head out, shy as a dormouse. She cupped her fingers around her mouth, keeping to a stage whisper. Is he gone? Various assenting voices chimed in. Baxter flashed her a thumbs up. Seeing the coast was clear, the singer's head vanished for a brief instant before reappearing. The rest of her body followed along with it. She swanned her way into the main area, oozing feigned confidence. All the terror of her departure had gone. Hastily pasted over, as though nothing had happened. She brought a hand to shade her eyes, casting a look around the room. Her immaculate lipstick to lips parted. Has my dear, delightful, meddlesome friend decided to finally beat it too? Not yet. The friend's voice called out somewhere behind you. While everyone's attention had been elsewhere, they had managed to collect the discarded bouquet. In their other hand was the lone flower the singer had pitched. They held it out to her. I'm sorry about the flowers. I lied. They weren't from him. They never were to begin with. The singer clapped her mouth in shock. What? You tricked me? Her cry projected clear as bell ringing with her betrayal. Her pristine face was crumpled in furious scowl. directed at the friend at first, then everyone else in the room. And you were all in on it? The friend darted to her side in effort to placate the bubbling apologies over and over with a mollifying tone. I know, I'm a terrible friend and I shouldn't have done it. Finally, something we can agree on. Fine, I deserve that. But just hear me out, okay? Even though they won from him, there's nothing stopping you from flipping this on his head. I'm not sure I like where this is going. I'm a singer, not an acrobat. It's easy. When he comes back, why don't you give him the flowers? The singer stared blankly for a few seconds, then tossed her head back and bellowed with laughter. Her once lyrical voice was now cold and callous in timber. Oh, my darling friend, you should really consider joining the circus. I've never heard something so ludicrous. This is serious. I know it will work. Believe me, I'll be rooting for you. And not only me, you'll think so too, right, gang? After that prompting, the room was filled with shouts of agreement. Yeah! We'll be right behind you! Don't be afraid! What have you got to lose? The comments came bright and fast. More people pitched in with remarks about what happened while the singer was gone. Others simply nodded along. Though she readily dismissed her friend's suggestion, the audience reflection seemed to be more convincing. She stood in the middle of the flurried sound and cocked her head, listening intently. At that very moment, the shuffling of behind the curtain entrance. The fabric parted to reveal the bartender carrying a palm-sized metal bowl, piled high with ice. For the second time this evening, everyone froze in place. The singer slowly rotated on her heels to face him. His eyes were wide with surprise. Suddenly, she stumbled forward. The mutual friend gave her a nudge, knocking her balance off and towards the bartender. She wheeled around to glare at them before snatching a single flower. Her friend still held and about facing once more. He laughed a thin, nervous laugh and took one small step closer. A wide expanse separated them. Her footsteps echoed. 1 step, 2 steps. Then she ordered, too afraid to continue. She wavered on the brink of turning back. All at once, the crowd made good on their promise. Hollers of encouragement came from booths behind her, whoops and cheers and whistles of "Don't give up now." Come on, girl, I believe in you! Once again, the singer crept across the room, as though expecting to be attacked at any moment. The bartender was a statue watching motionless. Inch by inch, the distance closed. When only a few feet remained to separate them, the singer paused. She cast an anxious look from her target to where you and Baxter were sitting. At your side, Baxter smiled and inclined his head in a nod. He followed suit, giving her 2 thumbs up and a big grin. What are you waiting for? The poise and slowness of a puppet yanked on strings. She extended her arm, the flower gleamed in the dim light of the bar, a flush of red hanging in the air between them. The bloom was fragile, frail, vulnerable, like a naked, helpless heart, offered up in prayer. Everyone in the room held their breath. The two of them held each other's gaze, neither speaking a word. He knew she knew this was real this time. The bartender silently placed the bowl of ice down on the bar. A moment of choice, a crossroad. Then he walked over, stretched out his fingers. He caressed the petals of a single rose, light as a feather, and then he placed his fingers over hers and gently lifted the flower free. He accepted. The response was imminent. Big space exploded with applause. Cries of delight coming from all and sundry. The friend jumped up and down on the spot, suppressing a squeal. High fives were exchanged. There were wolf whistles and roars of approval. Baxter and you shared a look of silent satisfaction. Amidst the jubilee, the bartender returned to the counter to retrieve the ball of ice. Maybe it was a metaphor. The winter cold swapped for the first blooms of spring. He faced over to you and dropped a handful of possible metaphors in yours and Baxter's glasses. He batted away again. The wink. After that first climactic moment, the remainder of the story barreled ahead. No sooner had the lovers begun to open up to one another. Then, further complications reared their heads. First came the parents, who always claimed the two were fated. They were keen to seal the match and win the satisfaction over lording it over everyone. Nobody could bear the thought of granting them the satisfaction. So, began the elaborate schemes to keep the two families out of loop. Tragedy devolved into farce. At every step, the audience had a part to play. One scene saw a group of patrons acting as a diversion, keeping one parent of the parents occupied, while the lovers made their escape. In another, you and Baxter were recruited to slide secret notes along the bar while no one was looking. Even the band got to help, swapping one song in the program for another without warning. The singer's defined area transmuted into one of the passionate, heartfelt longing. It was a flurry, the characters coming and going with chaotic energy you normally could only see a distant on stage. And although the careful coordination of mayhem, the actual waiter diligently continued to cater to patrons, serving more drinks, clearing tables, and lighting candles. He ducked and weaved between chairs and bar stools, and other characters sometimes even participating in the action, but normally fading into the background. At one point, the singer and he almost collided, and it would have sent a particularly hefty tray flying, but it was all part of the performance. They both expertly caught the glasses before they fell, too loud approbation from the audience. The journey was precarious, full of twists and turns, but with everyone felt the protagonists were finally able to face their feelings for each other. Hardly anyone could resist getting caught up in it. When the confession came at last, the deafening cheer went up, the two shared a kiss, and the room was plunged into darkness. The band struck up a lively tune, and when the lights came back on, the actors took their bows to a well-earned pause that seemed to last for hours. Finally, the floor cleared, the lamps dimmed on to their usual twilight. It was a finish. Love had triumphed, at least for one night. With that show over, things wound down for the evening. There were no more performances booked, although it was still a while until closing. People could enjoy the room as a normal bar, the band continued to play, and patrons milled about for their drinks. Some were animatedly discussing the performance you'd just seen. The atmosphere was convivial. Baxter let out a content sigh and fiddled absent-mindedly with his second baby Bellini. He barely touched it since it arrived. Seeing that you were aimlessly looking around, he caught your eye with the toe of his head and a quirk of his eyebrow.
What do you think?
Now then, was the show to your liking? I'm all ears. You can be honest, it can be a lot to take in. Are you kidding? It was so fun! I'm glad to hear that. They put a lot of effort into their craft. The dedication to entertainment is commendable. You might be interested to know the shows aren't always like this. They have quite a wide selection of different genres. The murder mysteries are always popular, but I wasn't sure how you'd feel with an interactive performance with the capacity for violence. Those can get rather intense, to say the least. Even the play we just saw is rarely performed the same way twice. As far as I heard, they often change the premise, shuffling the characters and events around as needed. You ever recall the ever-suffering friend, desperate to help the fated couple find love? Well, some nights, it's they who charm the heart of the singer or the bartender. In that situation, the third party is, instead of refusing their help out of kindness, not wanting to get in the way of their impossible romance. Sometimes the characters' families detest one another, Romeo and Juliet style. On those nights, the singer and bartender dislike each other too, but pretend to fall in love in order to spite their own parents. And then, of course, it happens for real. On rare occasion, they simply play hard to get, picking a quarrel for no reason other than to get frustrated at their would-be matchmakers and laugh with the guests in private. So you see, there's enormous potential for telling a whole host of different stories, but usually the core idea is the same. The two characters, for whatever reason, are always talking past each other, always failing to communicate, and it's up to the audience to lend a hand. I think it's a fascinating concept. Personally, a very novel form of entertainment. My drink is not finished. You listen attentively to Baxter's explanation. Regardless of what you thought of the performance, it was nice to hear him passionate about something. He spun from side to side on his bar stool, a dry smirk on his face. I suppose I find the fundamental concept rather amusing too. It's so obvious from the outside, the way the characters let their pride become an obstacle to their unhappiness. As I've said before, if they wanted each other so desperately, what point is there in saying the opposite? It's plainly not right. To yourself and the one you care for. And so unpalpatably that it compels us in supporting cows to action. Just the right interactive theatre, I suppose. Are you saying you never pretend to be something you're not? Baxter rocked idly back on his stool, giving the appearance of thought, but maybe acting mere mischievous. One hand stabbed his drink. No comment. Eventually, a little voice in the back of your head prompted you to speak again. Things are the ticket and the ride, and pretty much everything. You know how to treat a date. It honestly surprised you that Baxter had been able to get seats at such short notice. It seemed like the place was pretty popular. The performance you had watched had been a full house. Unable to hide your curiosity, you put the question to the man himself. Where exactly did you get the tickets for this? Instantly, Baxter's face tensed, his easygoing smile losing some of its effortlessness and tugging down at the corners. That. Of course. He crossed his arms in a way that struck you as mildly defensive. And maybe you remember the friend of my parents, the ones I visited recently. Well, it just happens they're in the performance business. Theatre, ballet, musicals, all kinds of productions. They specialize in the large-scale events, all that kind of nature. This venue isn't one of theirs, but they were able to pull some strings on my behalf.
Of course.
It's a question of knowing the right people, who know the right people. But we could have even had full backstage access with the main cast if I asked. It was as if we were singled out for some special attention during the show, on account of being seated at the bar. I'll have to remember to thank them for that. I'm sure they were pleased to know that our date went well too. You can't help it. Your eyes widened a little. You hadn't figured that Baxter would have that kind of pull. Seeing your response, Baxter's features chilled further. His brows knitting together. He shrugged his shoulders in a sigh.
Truthfully,
I do try not to lean on that kind of thing too much, if you can believe me. I appreciate it might not look like that now. You could say that it's a means for me to preserve my sense of independence. It's easy to be proper if you can fit the bill. I don't want that to be what draws others to me. But after all that, here I am, leaning on the same old crutch. Nothing has changed since I was 6. How quaint, how wonderful, how truly excellent. As he rambled on, Baxter was speaking more and more inwardly, his tone increasingly acrid. Is this really any better than yesterday? What have I achieved? He could only sit and listen to the brief tirade continued. Had Baxter been sitting on this ever since the coffee shop? It was true, he hadn't come as satisfied by reassurance, and by only a second chance. But if you had known it'd make him feel worse, you wouldn't have let it go this far. Baxter managed to snap out of this train of thought, his attention returning to you. He looked rather sheepish.
Forgive me.
I'm sorry, Callie. Perhaps it would be best to call it a night. I wouldn't want to sour the evening after such a charming show. He swiftly rose from his bar stool, mind made up. You didn't stop him. Attempting the conversation in a public space wasn't a wise plan. Instead, you hurried to follow. Crossing the floor to the exit, you passed the bartender and a few of the other cast members. You quickly expressed your appreciation to them and got cheery waves and thanks in return. Some of the sounds and colors became blur before long you'd stepped into the street. Baxter was already a few places down the block, heading back to his car. He stopped for you to catch up. In exchange, a few pleasantries on the journey home, but nothing too involved. Baxter was making an effort to keep the conversation light, just as he promised. He really didn't want to leave on a bad impression, that much clear. You used the time in the space between sentences to mull things over. There was something that needed to be done, but you couldn't figure out what you would say. You imagined scenarios in your head. It would all end up the same with him, appreciating the sentiment while not believing. It was hard to think clearly. Your head was full of the smell of faint cocktails and snatches of remembered music, like the show in your life blending together in the shaker of a mixer. You sank down into the soft leather of the car seat and let the images wash over you in waves. The stars were twinkling playfully overhead as you arrived back in your own neighborhood. The moon was a yellow lantern floating up high. As you stepped out Baxter's car, and the sea breeze danced across your cheeks, after the summer heat of the daytime, it was cool and refreshing, like the first sharp sip of an iced drink. Baxter escorted you to the front door. He was, as ever, determined to be a gentleman. The deliverance of it gave you pause, in a way that hadn't been until now. He lifted the corners of his mouth, his eyes wrinkled. A perfectly arranged smile.
Good night.
Good night, Callie. I had a wonderful time. The manner he said it made it sound like he was less expressing his feelings and more like he was stating a want, as if he was determined it should be true. Ever since his dip in mood at the end of the event, your mind had been filled with thoughts that you couldn't grasp out of hold. Those questions pressed against you insistently. Why was he still beating himself up for what happened yesterday? Why did he seem so like himself before he left the bar? What was going on inside that head of his right now? Having bid you a farewell, Baxter moved to leave. There was a priority in making himself scarce. His eyes were something like tiredness, something like fear. And the prospect of other sudden indignity rearing its head was too much for him to bear. He lost the chance to save face entirely in front of you by now. Best gun things off at the roots. To see him like that tugged at your chest, you can't accept him going back to that empty house to wallow in frustration. But what could you do? Your mouth opened without anything to fill it, but words somehow came anyway. Would you want to come inside? Things couldn't end here. Now was much certain what you needed was more time. Baxter paused, having turned to go. The far side of him was in shadow. As he slowly swiveled back to you, the light caught his face. Once more, his expression was conflicted. It held surprise, confusion, and no small amount of intrigue. His lips parted as if to speak, but his brow furrowed. And then he closed his mouth, again without any sound. He did. He evidently had no idea where the present movement was leading. Neither of you did. Baxter settled for a simple tilt of his head. His eyes posing a question. Hey, the night's still young, and I hear there's a really great local place to grab a drink, and it's really close by. You fished out your house keys and jingled them pointedly. Would you care to join me? Despite playing it off as nothing serious, you were silently willing Baxter not to go. Just a little longer. During your elaboration, Baxter couldn't help being amused. He recovered from his initial trepidation enough to laugh at your desperate plan. A drink, you say? A fascinating suggestion. How decidedly original of you. One eyebrow was raised, his voice dripping with irony. You scored her expression, a picture of innocence. Whatever could he be implying? Whatever could he be implying? There was nothing, at least, that is absurd about this request. Baxter's features relaxed into a look of fond regard. His eyes searched your face for a moment. One hand was tucked casually into his back pocket. Though some tension appeared to be gone, his stance was still one of indecision, contemplation. For some reason, your imagination conjured up a vision of him at the woodland crossroad, standing just as he was now, carefully weighing which way to go. At this point, you felt as though he could guess. The thought you processed was going through, even if he wasn't saying it out loud. For Baxter, it was all a question of the eventual outcome. When everything was over and he looked back on this moment, how would he best be like to remember it? To end things here and avoid any further mishaps, or should the night continue with the accompanying risk of additional regrets? Baxter didn't only aim to make most of his time by doing what he liked, but meticulously crafting the experience and emotions he would have. You sighed inwardly, recalling simpler times, as if it was only another case which frozen dessert to pick from an ice cream truck. At length, his mind was made up. Baxter cleared his throat and straightened his stance, facing you square on.
Sweet.
Thank you for the offer, Callie. It's very kind of you to be so generous with your time. I should like to take up that suggestion if it's no inconvenience. A drink would be lovely. A rush of relief hit. Goodness. You still had a chance to turn things around. You likely had a similar thought, though your ideas on what would achieve was certainly different. Flashing a cheerful smile, you unlocked your front door and led the way inside. Baxter dutifully followed, pausing only to wipe his shoes at the doormat, just as Mao would have wanted. Oh, that's the wrong place to press space. All the lights were on in the living room, and there was a brief flash of panic at the prospect that you lured Baxter into a run-in with your family at the worst possible time. As luck would have it, when you poked your head around the doorway, the room was empty. You couldn't hear movement. You're alone for now. So you gestured Baxter to sit down and make himself comfortable. He graciously accepted the invitation. Rather than crash on the couch, he sauntered over to the table and pulled up a chair, random and improper to the last. Having got this far, you willed the honest components of your brain into motion. After seeing a professional like a bartender at work, you had some standards to live up to. First things first, the technical reason for why you invited him. What do you want to drink? We have juice, milk, other things. Just water, please. I don't have much of an appetite for anything else right now. His confidence came without hesitation, but lacked the usual degree of confidence you'd expect from him. The sound of it spoke volumes. While nobody was so far as to call him fragile, there's no denying that Baxter was a long way from his usual bold self. Gotcha! One water coming right up. You reach for a pair of glasses, deciding to stick with water yourself to keep things simple. After pouring some chilled water from the fridge, you brought the drinks over to the table and sat down across from Baxter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Baxter sipped at his water quietly, then placed it back down in front of him. It struck how bizarre the situation would appear to anyone who'd happen to be watching. Two people sitting at the dining room table, dressed to the nines, gingerly sampling glasses of plain water. He mentally whispered an apology to the tender of the jazz bar. You were a little ashamed at your feeble imitation of his skills. It's a good thing your moms weren't around to see this either. They would probably never let you down, not even in a million years. But that was all beside the point. You knew and Baxter knew that the pretext of coming over for a drink was simply that, a thinly veiled excuse. Only this very particular kind of emergency would necessitate visiting a neighbor's house for nothing more than a glass of water. And yet, in a way, it had an emergency, a relationship emergency. You sincerely hoped that this brief borrowed moment would give you both a chance to clear the air and reach some kind of mutual understanding. Baxter reached down to fiddle with the tumbler of water in front of him. Though, without lifting it up to his lips again, he stared into it, searching. After a while, he spoke.
I deeply apologize.
I feel like I must sound like a record at this point, but it's exceedingly considerate of you to extend your hospitality this far. I'm grateful. His gaze didn't lift, but one corner of his mouth did. It looked as though it took some effort. He maintained it just long enough to be sure you'd seen it, then dropped it like a heavy weight. He quietly sighed once, as though to catch his breath. He continued.
To be honest,
I must confess, however, if it was up to me, none of this would be happening. I find myself regretting my actions up to this point. Things would have been for the better if I had not said anything after the show, or if you didn't treat them as if they mattered. It was a brief moment of frustration, and it caused so much trouble, and an evening ruined by nothing for nothing. And this was already my second go at inviting you out for an occasion. We don't need to retread what happened the first time. He dusted his head to one side, made a bit of sound with his tongue. I should be better than this. It irks me so much to make the same mistake over and over. Voice trembled with frustration, his eyes dark and downcast. He dropped a forceful whisper, repeating the words as if to convince himself of them, as if to nail them into his chest. I was better than this, wasn't I? Baxter, you haven't done anything wrong. You willed yourself sanity. There was no room for equivocation? I don't know the fucking word. That's a terrible way to deal with emotions. You shouldn't ball that kind of thing up and hide it from everyone. Baxter finally lifted his eyes to meet yours. They were narrowed, their intention unreadable. The cruel curve to his mouth spoke for itself. However, with a jolt, he realized there was a poorly disguised mockery. And still, you could tell it wasn't meant for you. Then, that cutting smile opened, and the words came out, pointed and pained and sharp. And it was all aimed inward, at himself. This whole situation, it's asinine. I haven't known you long enough to be causing this kind of trouble. I'm literally a stranger, and that we're dating. And I wouldn't And I won't be here long enough for that change. As welcoming as you are here, it can't be forgotten.
I swear.
I was only supposed to be part of the fun. A worthwhile piece of summer scenery. Someone who added to the experience, not held it back. You shouldn't have to baby me, to sit there and spend your time making me feel better when I don't keep it together. His hands clenched on the table, his knuckles a dog of white. The mess I am in the mornings, the drama I cause in the evenings, the person I am when the show is over, those aspects shouldn't be any real concern. I don't provide that support to you, do I? And how could I when I don't know you? No. It's not fair to make you worried, or worse, guilty over what happens to me. What matters is that when we're together, it's for the pleasant parts of existence. The less ideal shades of life can be managed separately. He slumped back a little in his chair, the power having gone out of his voice. That's all I wanted. The blood was still pounding in your ears. Witnessing Baxter like this, as you had never seen him before, was equal parts exhilarating and shocking. His inner conflict was now an exposed wire. How many times had you sat across from him in these past few days? And how was it only now that it felt like you were truly seeing the person in the chair opposite? You took a moment to process your thoughts, steady your breath. Here, at last, was the crux of the matter. It was clear that when Baxter came to Sunset Bud, he had set himself a series of rules. Rules about how much to involve himself, how much of an impact to make. Like the tourist concept of only leaving footprints behind, but taken to the extreme. There wasn't space for him to be complicated, to have negative emotions, to show different sides of himself to anyone. To do so would be a declaration of duty. You weren't going to criticize him for wanting his privacy. It was too important to him, and you respected that. This kind of framing, one where he had an obligation to minimize himself for others' benefits, it was only causing pain. In spite of what he felt was right, you cared too much about him by now to let him continue carrying on like this. Cautiously, you opened your mouth. You spoke honestly, and with much composure as you could manage. Right now, more than anything, Baxter needed to know how wrong he was. He wasn't a burden, and his feelings didn't hurt you. You tried your best to communicate this with him. And then, another thought made itself known to you. When that ached under your ribs, you couldn't help but give it a voice. You finally met again. After all those years, you hadn't been a nobody to me for a long time. You said your piece and went silent. The house lay still, and the windows were empty portals black with night. The only sound was your breathing. Baxter's eyes had been locked with yours during the speech, the last heat of his frustration smoldering within them. Now, in the quiet, you finally felt the embers fade away completely. His gaze slowly slid to one side, then down. He swallowed. You. The sound drifted to you across the table. A small hushed sigh. Thank you. It was simply said, no pretense or caveats. Baxter had given up with the fight with himself for now, and accepted what you had told him. You let your body unclutch as you watched the creases in Baxter's brow begin to disappear. A hand emerged from beneath the table to lift his glass. He sipped his water, eyes closed. He took that as your cue that the discussion had run its course. There was no guarantee that things would change going forward. You weren't so arrogant to think that Baxter's behavior would be altered at all. At once. Nothing drastic anyway. You listened to your feelings, but who could really say how it would impact what happened in the future? The past couple of days held up a mirror to Baxter, showing him a reflection that wounded him, cutting too close to the bone. There were hurts that ran deeper than he let you reach. He didn't mean to mistrust you. It may not have been a matter of trust to begin with, but you hoped that over time, Baxter might come to count on the fact that there was at least one person out there who would accept him. You wanted him to have that. Another souvenir to remember you by. The minutes passed and sip by sip, the two of you drank your way towards the bottom of your water glasses. The silence can be called effortlessly comfortable, but it wasn't awkward. Companionable, perhaps. Baxter sucked in the last drops of his cup, then moved to stand and hurried. Thank you again. That was refreshing. Both the water and the conversation. Still, I should be going. He was matter of fact, with the air of calm and finality. You weren't able to disagree. You nodded and rose in parallel, moving to take the glasses back over to the kitchen. You had managed to set out what to achieve. It was alright to let things end here for the time being. The night had spun around your way, and hopefully Baxter could see it as a positive when he reflected on it. You walked with him across the living room floor to the front door. With his back towards you, you heard him begin to say something.
I appreciate the understanding.
I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this with me. Listening in spite of, well... He gestured to himself, the meaning clear, but you could tell that... But before you could tell him not to mention it, he reached the front door and came to face you. There was a mischievous grin on his face. You welcomed him like an old friend. But now, since the final act is over, how would we rate this event? I sincerely hope it was acceptable on the whole. The question had a laugh to it, and underneath there was a faintest hint of that self-mockery from before. But now it was toothless, empty of malice, and entirely in good humor. Couldn't help but snort a laugh, unrestrained and affectionate. Oh, Baxter! How quickly he recovered his footing. Don't worry. It's a solid hit with the judges. You haven't lost your touch. I had a good time. Thanks for the fun evening out, and for stopping by, too.
My pleasure.
And don't mention it. The pleasure was all mine. Good night, Callie. Have a nice night, Baxter. Baxter liked you. Even if he didn't want you to know. Even if he didn't want you to know him, you were sure of that much. And then he made a good on his promise to depart. Baxter stepped out into the dark. The door shut behind him, and the long day came to a close along with it. When he was gone, you remained in the entryway, a while lost in thought. You'd see him again. Perhaps tomorrow. Perhaps not. You might have plans, but there would be a next time. You saw your face reflect in the dark glass window by the door. You found yourself wondering which Baxter you would meet when the day came. Whoever he was, whenever it was, you'd be there. And that's the end of Drinks. Thanks for staying, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now!